Last week, we talked about the question, is your HR department AI ready? And many of you are. Many of you are. And so this week, we're jumping into where do you start? And that's exactly what we're going to focus on for this episode. I'm super excited. We're talking high volume, low judgment tasks that you can automate in your HR team right now. And if you don't have an HR team, even better. This is exactly where you need to start if you're a CEO of a small business or an office manager. So let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Don't Waste the Chaos. I'm your host, Kerri Roberts. I've been doing this HR thing for well over 20 years now, and I use AI a ton in my business. As a matter of fact, outside of the HR aspect, from the administrative aspect of my business, I'm saving around $65,000 to $70,000 a year by utilizing AI. And how am I doing that math? Well, I used to have two part to full-time people that worked for me. One focused on marketing, the other focused on admin. And those positions have been eliminated and they have all been automated. And I'm utilizing AI for that. It's been so fun. It's been challenging. It's been exciting. But the best part for me, being a small business owner as well, like so many of you, is I got to see while top line revenue is growing, bottom line revenue also grew too, which has been, like 10 out of 10. Thank you very much. So we are going to talk about how to implement AI specifically in your HR function. And I would say where we want to start right now is not with everything. If you start with everything, you're going to get burned. It's not sustainable and you're going to get wobbly. You're going to put the wrong things in there. So today I'm going to talk about 5 things in particular that I think you should do, you should automate immediately. And then I'm going to talk about 3 things that you absolutely should not use AI for because it is not for everything. While I'm using it for a lot, I'm certainly not using it for everything. My clients don't talk to AI. And when it comes to my client work, it's me. I'm focused on that, but I've cut a lot of other things in my business and either cut them entirely or automated them. This is just a great time for you to take a look at revenue generating activities and what you actually need to do. I talked about this on a different episode, but I essentially did the Pareto principle in my business and applied it and said, where's 80% of my revenue coming from? And then those things, obviously, I want to focus on, and I want to take the high volume, low judgment pieces of those tasks and automate them, but make sure that I'm doing those tasks overall. The places where I'm not generating a lot of revenue, not the top 80% of my revenue, I just cut. Because here's the thing, if you've got a person doing it, you're going to make sure that that person has a fulfilling job assignment and you're going to give them tasks that maybe is not revenue generating because you want to make sure to fill their time if you've got a person. But if you're looking at what to automate, you're not going to automate things that don't matter in your business. That doesn't make any sense. And so you can really start to see what is value added and what's not. So that's how I got to this in my business. But I'm super excited to get into it with you. This is going to give you hours back of your week. But it certainly didn't automate my whole job. I'm doing more work. I've got more clients. I've got June and July were my highest revenue months that I've ever had. I expect that August will be along the same track. And so if you automate too much, it's an expensive mistake. If you don't automate enough, it can be an expensive mistake. So let's talk about the 5 HR tasks that I would automate first. And here's the rule. If you do it a lot, it's repeatable and it's low judgment. So it doesn't really need a person to do it, but it's something that drains your week and doesn't actually require you. That's when you know this might be a good task to automate. But I'm going to give you some ideas to kind of get your brain going. Bad candidates or anything that a wrong call could hurt you, hurt a real person, cause a legal exposure. We don't want to lean into AI for those things. So first 5 things to automate first. And I'm going to start out with one that's controversial. I've seen a ton of people say that you absolutely shouldn't utilize AI for this. And I would just say they're wrong. They're maybe looking at it in the wrong way. But let's talk about resume screening and initial filtering when it comes to candidates. This is exactly a place that I would recommend and do recommend to all of my clients to utilize AI. And I've heard many people say like, oh, well, AI is biased and all of these things. If you're feeding the prompts correctly, if you're giving it accurate information, it shouldn't be any more or less biased than if a human was screening it. Okay, so check with me here. This is first pass sorting against must-haves. All right. So if you're spending your time on the shortlist, not the entire pile. So people are still involved in the process. They're just going to be involved in the shortlist. And when people get all up in arms with AI about this, I just find this to be interesting because if you're using Indeed or LinkedIn, back in the day, it used to be Monster, any candidate sourcing website right now already and has been using AI for years. If you use United Kronos Group, if you use ADP, if you've got an HR payroll software, is what I'm listing now, has already been utilizing AI for years when it comes to candidate screening. So it always makes me laugh when I see people saying, like, oh, you can't use AI in candidate screening. We have been. HR has been already for years and years and years. I mean, I have this set up and in place, which we call it minimum quals. We're screening for minimum qualifications. This has been in place since my early career in HR, which started in 2008. And so this has been going on. So it's funny to me that people are really sensitive about it. I'm talking about minimum qualifications. So we can do this in a very simple version by using, let's say, Claude Project or a custom GPT that's loaded with your job must-haves first, which is exactly how an HR payroll system or Indeed or LinkedIn is doing it. You load your must-haves and then you've got qualifiers and it automatically kicks them in one direction, advancement, or another direction, declination. And so if you don't have this set up on whatever job search tool you're utilizing, and if you're not utilizing a job search tool, then you should set this up in either Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever tool AI you're using. But this is the perfect thing to do. You copy and paste the job description. Let's say you're doing this in ChatGPT or in Claude Project. Take the job description, copy it over or upload, and then upload all of the applications or the resumes that you're getting in, and then give it instructions on reviewing the must-haves on your job description. So this puts the burden on you to have a good job description, and then takes those applicants and their resumes and gives an initial screening. If they don't have the must-haves, then they are a declination. Now, we want to make sure that if there's, things just entirely missing, then like, let's say job gaps, years not worked, things like that, we're not going to have AI screen those folks out. We're looking for a specific set of things, and then AI should rank those. And you're going to give prompts on all of this. And it sounds more complicated than it is. So let me walk you through. So let's say I post a role for a social media specialist, and I have my job description, and my job description says they have to have a minimum of 3 years working in marketing. They have to have experience with Canva and maybe, let's say, Plan That or some other kind of scheduling tool. And you could just say some kind of scheduling tool. And maybe for me, they have to have at least 1 year experience with podcasts or something like that. So I've got my job description, and they have to have a bachelor's degree maybe, or a 2-year degree, whatever it is that I want. I take my job description, I put it into AI, and then I take all of the applications, if I'm doing applications or just resumes otherwise, and I put those in and I say, rank these candidates, give them a score, 4 stars down to 1 star on their fit up against the must-have qualifications in the job description. And that's what it's going to do. Now, if I was doing this inside of Indeed or LinkedIn or our applicant tracking system inside of our HR payroll software, I might have it to where it says, for the must-haves, anybody who doesn't have the must-haves, send them a declination. And that just means it's automatically going to route them into the declined pile, and it's going to also send them a declined email, which I think is ideal. This is a workflow that I would want set up if you have an applicant tracking system or if you're utilizing a website that has those capabilities. But this is huge. But you can just do sort the pile, not reject the pile, sort the pile if you don't feel comfortable. But again, this is something that's been going on for a really long time. And I made a post on TikTok that went viral a couple of months ago, sharing how I was utilizing AI to help me screen out candidates, and people just went bananas and said, like, what's the point of HR if you guys are just going to have AI do your job? And, like that's just ignorance. And if you think that way, you're probably really ignorant to the fact that almost every website that you're applying to, like let's say it's a professional role and you're applying on LinkedIn, LinkedIn has things that recruiters can automatically put in there, 3 years experience with Microsoft Outlook, or, must have experience with HubSpot or whatever it is. Recruiters are putting that information in there and then it's automatically screening you out. Now, the recruiter goes in and looks at it and says, okay, we either will choose to have LinkedIn send the declination automatically, or maybe we want to manually send those. And maybe that's where people are getting hung up. I've always done it as an auto declination, because to me, if you're applying and you didn't point out some of the core technologies that you've utilized to get the job, it's not really my fault that the system's going to screen you out. Like maybe you should have applied more robustly for the job. And that's not discriminatory. That's just minimum qualifications. So I do understand things around racial bias. Maybe if a job description's written in a certain way, you can kind of rule out, let's say, men or women or certain races or whatever by the way that you write a job description. And that's a topic for another day. So based off of how you have that set up, maybe you're screening out a certain type of person, but by and large, resume screening and initial resume filtering is the number one thing that I would use right now when it comes to automating inside of HR. It's going to save you a ton of time. Of course, there's a human checkpoint. You want to read every shortlisted resume yourself and never let it go to auto reject on anything that may carry a bias, like an employment gap or a non-traditional path or a career changer type of thing. Those aren't the minimum qualifications we're setting up. We're setting up around what technology they need to have, years of experience, education. That's what I mean by minimum qualifications. And it just is what it is. And if you're a candidate listening to this, first of all, way to listen to an HR person. This will help you get closer to getting the job that you want. But if you're a candidate listening to this and you're thinking that's not fair, think about this when you're writing your resume. You need to make sure that you're truly capturing what is being looked for. And honestly, we have to have some kind of baseline. When I put a role out there, I don't do recruitment for clients very often, but every once in a while, I'll help them put a role out there. If you don't set up those minimum qualifications, you will get hundreds and hundreds of applications. And it's just paralysis by analysis, because it's just hard to even get in there and start to review them. So this minimum qualification thing is golden. It's something that you definitely need to use. Okay, I've belabored that one. Second thing that I would be doing, interview scheduling and candidate communication. This kind of goes hand in hand. You should absolutely be automating this. The back and forth, it's days on your calendar, and it absolutely shouldn't. What a colossal waste of time. And so I would have, like I said, those auto declinations set up. I would also have a message saying, thank you for your interest. We'd like to advance you to the next step in the process, which is I recommend this questionnaire. Please complete this questionnaire, which would be questions that I've already built. Maybe I've used AI to help me build those based on the job description, but please complete this questionnaire and email it back to me for review. And that right there is going to weed out some people, because some people will not fill out your questionnaire. I'm looking for people who are not mass applying for my role. I'm looking for people who really want to work at my company. So I always do a questionnaire, and I recommend to my clients to do a questionnaire, except for I've got some clients that are in construction, warehousing, distribution, trucking. I don't want to make it hard to find a candidate, and that's usually putting them more in a professional setting than what is comfortable. And so that might rule out candidates that I really, really want and that are desirable. So you have to read the room and know what that looks like. Also, let's say you don't do a questionnaire, then you can say we want to advance you to the next step in the process, which is an interview on the phone or video interview. And here's a link to schedule. And you should be using Calendly or something, your Microsoft Booking or whatever email tool that you use, whatever calendar booking tool that you use, so they can put the interview directly on your calendar and make it so much easier for you. And just say that they have to attach their resume or whatever it looks like. So that way you've got that information right there, but get rid of the back and forth. Candidates can book into real availability by doing this. There's a ton of tools. And then build a small library of email templates. This is really helpful for each stage of the game. So build an email template for we received your application. Thank you for your interest in working at our organization. We'll be taking, the next week or 2 weeks to review resumes, and then you'll hear back from us with next steps. So you should have one for received. You should have one for moving forward, which is what I talked about, whether it's questionnaire or phone interview or in-person interview, whatever that looks like. You should have an email template for scheduling. You should have an email template for not moving forward, which is what I'm calling declinations, declining them. And you can let AI personalize those also. If you just say, I need an email template for each of the stages of our interview process, and it looks like this, bing, 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 bing. Or what stages should we have in our interview process? There's a million uses of AI in this setting, but they can start drafting it in seconds for you. And then you should put that into your workflow. Here's the human checkpoint on this. The decision itself is yours. It's still a human decision, a human touch point on anything sensitive, especially the no, making sure if you've got a candidate that went all the way through the process, then, I recommend sending them something more personalized or giving them a call. If they're early in the process, automate it. I don't necessarily care about that. Automate the logistics. Just make sure you're not automating the empathy out of the process, because as a reminder, when somebody's interviewing for a job, they are talking about their friends and family and loved ones about this potential life change. And so don't take that for granted. Make sure that you are actually giving them communication and thinking about that. They're really excited and thinking about the next step in their life and how it might look to work for you. And so one, always reply. Always get them a message. And then two, think about that life implication and make sure that you're being sensitive and empathetic in that. It's a huge deal. If you aren't doing declinations for candidates, start today. That's just not very kind. It's not a very good reflection on your culture, in my opinion. Okay. Third thing I'm recommending that we're automating is onboarding paperwork and new hire workflows. I love workflows, especially in HR payroll technology. But if you don't have an HR payroll technology, you can use Zapier. You can set up Zaps or a number of different ways that you can get things automated. You can do scheduled tasks inside of Claude Project. ChatGPT is catching up with some of the co-work style things. Here's what we want. We want a checklist for onboarding. So from the time that first of all, how do we handle the recruitment process? What are the steps in that? And then from the time that we give a job offer to the first day of employment, what are the steps that need to be done inside of that? What could be completed inside of that time period? And then from 0 days to 90 days, what could be automated? We need checklists for all of these. And again, if you're like, I don't have a checklist, start out with AI. AI can get you about 70 to 80% of the way there. And then you need to actually look at what AI gave you and say, absolutely not. Or, okay, that gets my brain kind of twirling around and thinking about this. But the checklist, the forms, the reminders that should not be falling through the cracks. This is all what should be done when it comes to onboarding paperwork and the new hire workflow. So think about this. If you've got a platform, let's say like Gusto or UKG, United Kronos Group, or Rippling, which are all partners of mine, or, Paycom, Paycorp, Paylocity, any of those, or even if you just have QuickBooks Online, if you're super small, you have to have a new hire checklist. And many times inside of the system, you can build that right inside of there. But the offer letter, I'm talking I-9, W-4, e-signatures, benefits enrollment if you have them, IT and account setup tasks, reminders, so nothing falls through the cracks. You can have all of this set up and it automatically pushes to your new hire. And so it keeps you on track. Whether you're the manager or whether you're the business owner or whether you're the office manager or the HR pro, whatever, you can also have AI draft rule specific 30, 60, 90-day check-ins. I like a good 60-day review. You can put that in your system. And you can have it draft it all based off of that job description that you created. So that job description is really clutch. Here's the human checkpoint. The true welcome and the relationships, you can't automate those. The manager one-on-ones, the introductions, making someone feel like they made the right choice. Those are things we can't automate, but we can automate almost everything else. Everything that would be paper form, that gets automated. Okay, that was the third. Fourth, This one's a fun one. And this is something that I see a lot of organizations not doing yet, but totally should. And there's a million ways to do it. Employee FAQs and policy lookups. How much PTO do I have? What's the holiday schedule this year? Do we have bereavement leave? All of those self-service answers from your own documented policies. So you've already got, this is assuming that you've already got your handbook. These are awesome. This is really, really cool. So you can create an AI assistant based on your handbook and your policies. You can do this inside of Claude Project. You can do a custom GPT, chain it on your documents. You can do a Slack bot. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So then employees get accurate, instant responses. They don't have to wait, which is so exciting, to things like, how much PTO do I have left if you have an HR payroll software? Or, what's our remote work policy? All of those things, it answers from your actual policies, not from the open internet. So it's not going to Google. So here's the human checkpoint. If there's something sensitive or legally attached, then we're going to want to answer that as a human. Do I qualify for FMLA? That's something that we want to talk through as a human. We do have a form that they can submit. We even have some checkpoint documents, but the final decision, of course, on that is going to be human related. But we can walk them through, have you worked 1,250 hours in this calendar year? There's some initial things that we can walk them through. That chatbot should handle the top 20 questions that eat up your HR inbox. It's not going to handle other ones, but the top 20, think about the things that you get asked all the time. We can set up a chatbot for that. And that is so fun. You should be, by the way, doing the same thing with potential client questions. You can set up chatbots on your website, and you can think about all of it's kind of like an FAQ. You take your FAQ and you put it into a chatbot. And that way, when somebody types in, like, what's your pricing structure look like? Or how do you handle cancellations or whatever? A chatbot can automatically give them answers, and that just slows down the amount of emails that you get. So that's external. Internal for your people. Set up your policy, and then essentially AI can dig right into your policy and say, the policy states on page XYZ on section 3.2.1 that this, and this. And could they just scroll through and look at your policy? Yes, but this makes it easier. And we've got the technology to do this. So why wouldn't we? Okay. Last thing that I want to mention, the fifth thing that I want to mention that you should be automating right now in HR are your first drafts. So think about the first draft of a job description, the first draft of an offer letter, first draft of a policy language. AI can draft it, you edit it. So there are no more blank pages. AI starts it, and then your judgment is obviously still in charge. So give AI your existing templates, give AI your voice, give AI your brand, and it turns a blank page into a solid draft in minutes. In minutes. You can take a few bullet points for a role and turn it into a job description. You can take, and it will build you an offer letter if you can just say what the compensation is and if they're exempt and non-exempt and who they report to, give them some of those details. It can draft an offer letter. It is so good. It can give you a first pass at a new policy. I work in X state and X industry, and I'm needing a policy around social media use or whatever that looks like. Can you give me an initial draft or ask me questions that I should be considering? And it can start with that. It can even review your language. So if you already have a policy, it can review that. Here's the human checkpoint. You're going to edit every single one of these. You need to check to make sure it fits your culture in your organization. And it's not an attorney. So, sometimes we need to make sure we send things over to our attorney, especially on like policies or certain type of complex offers. So you add the judgment, you add the personalization that a template can't, but AI can get you to that 80%-ish mark, and then you do the last 20%. So 5 top things that I recommend you automate today: resume screening and initial filtering, interview scheduling and candidate communication, onboarding paperwork and the new hire workflows, the employee FAQ and policy lookups, and then the initial drafts for things, those first drafts for job descriptions, offer letters, policy templates. So that's where we're starting out. That's what I recommend. Your action item would be just to start with one of those. Don't start everywhere. That's going to feel like chaos. Start with one of those. But let's talk before we wrap about 3 things that I would never automate. things that should not be automated, and not like, oh, once I get enough information, we can't automate it. These are things that just legally, for legal protection and risk reasons and culture, holding culture to the vest, should not be automated. Final hire decision, final fire decision. Don't leave that up to AI. You've got context that AI does not have. So you want to make sure that maybe they can, give you a pros and cons list or read through your documentation and give you an outline to consider, but you're the one making the final calls on that. Number 2, performance and coaching conversations. The human relationship is the deal here. We want to have the context and really be using our empathy as part of the process. But again, it can review policies, it can review documentation, it can point you in a direction. But you as the human makes the final call on that. And then along those lines, any sensitive judgment calls, investigations, accommodations, anyone touching or anything touching anybody's individual rights or human dignity, those are things that AI should not automate for you. All of these things, I would say, are potential financial decisions. There's financial repercussions to this. If we don't automate, we're wasting time and money. If we automate too much, we're putting ourselves at a potential risk. So we need to think about, automating the right things, because that's efficiency. If you automate the wrong things, that's risk. And both are going to show up on the P&L. So we really need to use discernment here. Start slow. You don't have to throw absolutely everything. Just start with one thing. Pick one of the 5 that I mentioned. Document the process so that AI has something to learn from and that it can automate your workflow from there before you touch the next. If you do one at a time, that is how this is going to stick. If you try to do it all at once, it's just going to seem overwhelming. It's going to seem like another part-time job, and none of us have time for that. So let me give you some stats and data before we hop off here on why I'm making these recommendations. So here, I saw this stat from Deloitte. HR teams are spending up to 57% of their time on administrative tasks. And in general, those high volume, low judgment tasks, just administrative, sometimes we disrespectfully call this paper pushing because that's what it is, right? This is why you're going to buy back your time. 75% of most HR tasks are administrative. Get those automated. Absolutely get at least the front end of those processes automated. I was reading on SHRM, 85% of employers using automation or HI or AI in general report time savings and greater efficiencies. Obviously, like this is going to pay off. We know that it is. 85% of employers using automations or AI are seeing payoffs on this. Yes. Okay. SHRM also said AI powered recruitment can cut cost per hire by 30%. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. The money talks on that. Another SHRM study, recruiting is the number one place that HR is already applying AI. 27% of organizations are already using AI. And I would say it's probably more than that. I'd say a lot of organizations aren't thinking that the minimum qualifications screen that happens in Indeed and LinkedIn is utilizing AI. I mean, that is AI before we started calling it artificial intelligence. 65% of HR professionals still don't feel ready to work with AI. So if you are feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind the time, I haven't started doing any of this. No, 65% of HR pros right now are scared, apprehensive. They don't feel ready. So you're not behind. It's just time for you to step it up, right? Like it's time for you to start looking at it, but you're not behind. A lot of people, the majority, 65% don't feel ready. So it's just going to be one at a time. I walk through these exact workflows, especially around hiring and onboarding in my HR Foundations course. If you go to saltnightadvisors.com/resources, you can find my coursework. I've got my foundations course out there. I've got my HR operations course out there. And my strategic HR coursework is going to be available starting in August. So all of those can be found saltnightadvisors.com/resources. Of course, I always have my book, the HR Easy Button. This one's the foundational book. It's out on Amazon right now, paperback, hardback, Kindle. Go pick up a copy of that. And then if you hear all of this and you're like, I'm ready for it, but we actually just don't, because we're lean and mean, we don't have the capacity to set this up the internal capacity and capability and you want to work with me, just go to saltnightadvisors.com/contact and we'll have a conversation. Or if you want to see how your HR is standing up right now, the best way to do that, that's free, if you don't want to spend any dough on it, saltnightadvisors.com/HR audit will give you a mini HR audit. It takes you about 10 minutes. It's free. It will rank you. It'll help you know if you've got a lot of risk, if you just need a little attention, or if you've got a solid foundation. So I'd love to set you up with that. And once you do that assessment, if you're like, that feels uncomfortable at the very end, because I like automations, it has a link to my calendar and you can set up a 30-minute call with me just to talk through what you learned in your assessment and, what your fears are or what we'd like to tackle. So pick one of the five. Pick one of the five today. Dive in, and I would love to hear which one you chose. Next week, we're getting into policy writing with AI. We'll jump a little bit deeper into, and I mean writing a policy about AI utilization in your organization, which we all need because our employees are using AI. And if we don't have a policy for it, they're going rogue and we're not protected from an insurance perspective, from a lawsuit perspective. So we need that policy out there. So next week, let's jump into that. If you haven't hit subscribe, make sure you do that. I put quality content out every single week, every single Tuesday, if you haven't noticed. So I'd love it if you'd subscribe at your favorite place to pick up my show, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or Apple, pulling off of Buzzsprout, whatever that is. And please leave me a review. If you subscribe and leave me a review, it helps other business owners and leaders like you to be able to find my show. And that's what I want. I just want to be able to help more and more and more people with their HR foundation. Folks, I know that all of this can feel like chaos. Knowing where to start with AI, these new tools, you don't want to be too fast of an adopter, but you also don't want to fall behind. I understand that it can feel like chaos, but the work is worth it. So don't waste the chaos. Embrace it. I'll see you next week.